Well, hi there, and welcome to lesson number 7 of the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge, Painting Delicate Details and Nuances. Glad you're here again, and look forward to spending another half an hour or so with you working on this portrait. You can see where we left off from the last lesson. Well, I have put in some additional bonus videos. This is at a good stage, I think, where I'll be able to take you to the next step in the painting process. We have the values kind of locked into place on her face. I darkened her hair a little bit using ultramarine blue, believe it or not, ultramarine blue mixed with raw umber dark and alizarin crimson because we needed that ultramarine blue to tone it down. It was a little too orange, and ultramarine blue, or I should say blue in general, is the complementary color of orange. And so I mixed a little of that with raw umber dark and alizarin crimson just to tone it down and darken it, and added a couple glazes to the face. And this is where we're at. Much work to be done, and I hope you're doing well with your portrait. We had a fantastic time in our Facebook Live training earlier this week where basically showed you how to overcome struggles with your painting, and we had just a phenomenal time, like 100 people attending, and they got a lot of value out of it. It was cool just to take a student's painting and then paint on top of it, show you how to blend out areas that were a little blotchy. By the way, if you want to see that particular class, it is here on my YouTube channel. You can scroll back and find that, and definitely benefit from that. But hey, if you haven't signed up for the Acrylic Portrait Painting Challenge, still not too late. Even though we're at lesson 7 of 8, it is not too late to sign up. So you can do that by going to realisticacrylic.com /acrylic dash, or I should say realisticacrylic.com /spring dash acrylic dash portrait dash painting dash challenge. Of course, when you sign up, I'm going to send you the welcome kit, and you'll get all the good stuff, the supplies list, the gridded reference photo, the palette layout guide, and then I think a couple of other things as well. I just can't remember them off the top of my head. But sign up for the challenge, and you'll definitely want to be a part of this. You can do it at your own pace, and it's completely free, so why not? Anyway, we're going to dive right into the painting process here. As usual, I'm going to open up with a word of prayer. And hey, as I record this video, it is the National Day of Prayer for the U.S., so why not pray? Invite God in, the master artist, to help us do our best portraits ever. I think He loves it when His children who are given a creative gift use it to beautify the world around them, so why not? Father, I ask a blessing here. I ask a blessing on this painting. Lord, I pray that you would enable me to teach this part of the class well. I pray you'd help me to be able to get the nuances, the shading, all those things dialed in and demonstrate it for the students. I pray it would click, that they would really understand the concepts I'm trying to illustrate here. And in their own portraits, Lord, I pray that you would bless each and every one of them. They'd be able to overcome any struggles, any challenges, and really believe that they can do it, Lord. With your help, they can do it. And I pray, Lord, that you would just strengthen them and give them health. If any of them are having any ailments in their body, any pains, joints, whatever, I pray in the name of Jesus you would heal them. I pray you provide for them, keep them safe in this time, productive, and take them on to the next step in their journey, Lord, whether it's painting portraits on commission or painting portraits of family members, whatever it might be. Bless them, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Alrighty, let's dive in here. I'm going to grab some matte medium and just get that going on my palette. And then we're going to dive in. Now, I might be doing this class without so much editing. A lot of folks said they didn't mind a more raw version of this, which saves me some editing time, but it's good because I can spend more time painting and teaching, which is what I'd love to do, and I think that'll help you out. So let's put a glaze on her face. We need to do some smoothing layers, especially on the forehead, and I need to darken this value overall. Let's kind of zoom in here. So let's go ahead and add a glaze on her forehead. And I want to make sure I have the right version. I have two different versions of this painting on my Kindle, one that has more of a yellowish tint and one that has more of a reddish tint. And I prefer the one that has more of a reddish tint to it. So we're gonna use that. And let's go ahead and let's take some burnt sienna. So I'm just going to wipe that off here to the side. You can see that next to the matte medium. Let's take a little bit of raw umber dark. So a little of that and some raw sienna. We'll just kind of mix them together here. And what we're going to do then is go ahead and put a glaze on the forehead. I do need to get a white card. Fresh white card here, so I just want to show you what that would look like. There you go. You can see that. It's kind of still a pretty light glaze. It's got a lot of matte medium in it. Maybe about 80% matte medium, 20% paint. But let's start on this dark side of the face and work our way in and just see what that looks like. It's got to have enough of a yellowish tint to it yet that in the middle it has the luminosity that it needs, that vibrance that it needs to really stand out. We're going to bring this glaze all the way down into her eye area, up to the upper eyelid fold region. And I think that'll be good. Show you a little bit closer up what this brushwork looks like. But I think that'll be enough. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to see where else I can use this glaze. I might need to adjust the color a little bit. Yeah, maybe I can use this glaze on her cheek area. Let's go to that. So let's apply this glaze. Starting with the darker area, that's a good way to really test it out. Make sure it's not too crazy, because if you're applying a glaze, that gets a little crazy, it's a little out of hand, a little too dark or vibrant, and you put it on your light area, it's going to be a lot harder to remove it. So I would put it over the dark area first, then you can get a gauge for what it's going to do, and you can blend it in to the light area, and we develop a little bit of a gradient just by letting it overlap the previous layer. All right, so then we wipe the edge off using our finger so we don't have that sharp line, and just drag the brush over, flip the brush over on the other side, kind of smooth it out a bit, and that should be good. And if the glaze is light enough, it shouldn't be blotchy. There might be just a little bit of blotchiness, but it shouldn't be bad. And I could put a little of that glaze over here, but it really should get pinker on that side. So let's add a bit of Pyro Red Orange to this mix. I just dip my brush into the corner. That's it, just a little tiny bit. You can see on the brush here how I have it just on the corner. Then I wipe it off and place it right next to that other glaze, and then dip into the matte medium and really swirl it around using a lot of pressure. Now you can see how I'm holding my brush. I'm putting a lot of pressure here as I swirl this paint into the bristles, folding it over several times, almost like mixing batter for a cake. A lot of pressure, folding it over. And then we're going to go ahead and put that glaze over there. So let's do that. We'll just put this glaze right here. And it's going to go on the left-hand side right below the eye, but at this angle. I'm going to wipe a little of the glaze off of my brush so I can then smooth it out better. And I'll just put a little of that glaze as well under her eye. And it might take a little more pink than that, but that'll work. I mean, it's just made the faintest little difference. We'll probably have to add more later. There's some areas in her cheek that did get a little blotchy. Like I said, the glazes were drying a little faster for me than they usually do with the wood heat. I should have gotten a humidifier and put it in my studio, but I didn't. So I'll have to contend with some blotchiness on her face. It's not terrible, but it'll give me an opportunity to show you how to fix those areas up if you have that occurring in your painting. So that's all right. While I'm waiting for this to dry, I want to see what else I can do. I think I would like to get a little more glaze work on her back. Let's go to that area. And so let's take some raw umber dark. So I'm just going to place that here on the palette. A little bit of raw umber dark. And that might be what I need, just the raw umber dark by itself. So I'll show you that glaze, what that looks like on the white card. So it's pretty light. And I'm going to place that right here. And then a little bit on the right hand side as well. We'll have to do another glaze there again to darken that area more in general. But this is just kind of toning that area. I'm going to wipe it off so that it's more just to the right hand side. Okay. Now, what I want to do is put some highlights while this is drying. Let's get some highlights going in her hair. Actually, before I do that, I still have to darken the values on that side of her hair a little bit more. And I'm going to switch to a smaller flat edge brush for that. So we're going to take raw umber dark, ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson together. I don't know if you can see that mixture. Try to get that in the frame for you. So raw umber dark, ultramarine blue, and alizarin crimson together. So we're making basically a somewhat purplish black. This is what it looks like. Show you that here on the white card. Let's zoom out. We're going to need to go up to the hair actually. So let's go right there. And let's add this glaze in. It's going to be on this right hand side. And I want to place that very precisely to get this shape here. Just a little divot there. It's kind of darker in some of these areas. And I want to have this glaze a little darker on this side. And then have it fade off as it gets towards the top. Excuse me. And then we're going to also darken this little area in the middle, this part in her hair. And we'll bring that shadow up right in here. Add a little bit of this glaze below. We're going to develop some more textural and the beginning of detail work on her hair. A few little spots here and there. Add a little glaze to the top there. There we go. And we'll add a glaze to the back of her hair too. All right. Now I want to add the same glaze to the left side of her hair and just darken a few of these shadows right next to her face. Another glaze right here on that left side of her hair. Gives me another opportunity to develop more gradation. Each time I do a layer, it's another opportunity to get more shading because I can make the glaze go a little further out or further in from the previous glaze. So it either exceeds the boundary of that first glaze or it kind of hangs back a little bit. So either way, we can develop more shading using this method. So in other words, when I'm painting this side of the hair, I'm not always going to paint that whole strand. I'm going to hit just a couple of points that I discern have a darker value based on the reference photo. And I'm going to place that glaze like right here and here, but I'm going to miss an area right there because it's not as dark. By the accumulation of strategically placing glazes in certain spots, you're going to develop many, many layers of shading. And one area might have like 6 glazes on it. The other portion next to it might have only 3. And the one that has 6 glazes is going to be darker. All right, so you're able to develop that sense of gradation and shading just by how many layers you place in a certain spot. I'm going to move back to this part of her hair. I want to get some detail right in the middle here using this flat edge brush. It gets a nice corner to it. Let's zoom in there. You can really see what's going on. So we've got some little strands here. We darken this section above her hair like that. We just push the paint in using a little bit of a different directional brush stroke. Now we're going the opposite direction. We were going diagonally this way. Now we're going diagonally that way and brushing just a little bit in that direction. So it gives it a smoother application. All right, so instead of the brush strokes going this way, I'm using the skinny side of the brush and I'm pulling upward, pulling upward. And I'm cutting along the edge here using the skinny side of the brush and then fanning out from that and filling in this section, giving it a little more clarity, plotting out its edges a little more precisely. And I can do the same thing here. I can add some glazes to the interior and just get some detail work going on her hair. And then in this part on top, I can darken that area a little bit. Just get that three-dimensionality going in her hair. All right, and now I'm going to darken just this one little spot on the interior of that area down there. Let's show you that. Right in here, we're going to just darken this little section, that little triangular shape. We'll darken a section there, and then just get a little more differentiation right in here. There's a couple of little triangular shapes, and I'm just going to darken those little triangular shapes. And let's just slightly bring this edge into the clothing and just define that edge as if the clothing is casting a slight shadow on her back. You have to be careful with that because the color technically should be a little warmer than what I'm using. So I might have to just wipe that away. It really should have more of a reddish tint to it. Okay, and while we're working on this area, let's take this dark color and apply it on her neck because that value is quite dark. And I'm going to wipe my brush off on my palette, and then on the rag on my table, I have a big towel on my table, and then I'm going to just fan this edge out ever so slightly. And that starts to get some shading implied. Okay, now that being done, I think we're in good shape. I'd like to continue some glaze work on her forehead. Just continue the glaze work on her forehead. I want to really work on this gradient up here and smooth that out. So I'm going to take Raw Umber Dark. We're just starting to dive into some semi-opaque skin tones here. Raw Umber Dark with a little bit of titanium white. This will help us to smooth it out. So Raw Umber Dark, titanium white mixed together. And we'll use just a tiny bit of Indian yellow because it just looks like it has the slightest greenish tint to it. And then test this on the white card, see what that looks like. And then we'll want to test it on the canvas and see what it looks like there. So having that little bit of white there cools it down and it gives it more of a greenish tint. So we can start to employ that on her face. It is going to take some more work. One layer won't do it, but it'll get us in the right direction. So I'm just gonna, I think, leave off with that layer there, let that dry and come back again later, and we'll smooth that out some more. But let's add a little bit of this glaze to the left-hand side of her face in this interior portion. Again, we're just going to get that slight cool tone beginning there. And we're also going to apply a little of it to her chin. So it's just this area below her eye and then a little bit below her chin. So you can see that here. And I can actually just smooth out the edge of that little surface shadow with this same glaze if I'm very careful with it. I can put a little bit of it to the left of her lips. And that's a nice start. So that's how we kind of smooth out some of the blotchy look of the glazes, but we'll come back on top and we'll apply glazes to this and refine it some more. So it's kind of a back and forth between the semi-opaque layers and glazes. When we get to a certain point in the painting, we can add these semi-opaque glazes, like I say, using a bit of titanium white in the mix. And then going back on top of those areas with regular glazes just to add the additional nuances. So like, for example, her lips have to get a little darker. The shadow under the lips has to get darker. And there I'm going to be using more of a traditional glaze for that. Let's soften up this edge of her lip right there. That got a little dark. I'm going to zoom in some more. And let's take the round brush. I have a size 10. I'm going to spray the palette. Just make sure that stays nice and moist. We don't want that paint drying out. It gets really tacky and difficult to work with otherwise. And let's take some titanium white. And then we'll also take a little bit of pyrrole red orange. to show you that here on the palette. Titanium white, pyro red orange, and we're going to mix those together, plus a little bit of Indian yellow. And I'll show you this on the white card. It was a little difficult to show on my palette, but this is what it looks like on the white card. So that's a nice, beautiful color there. I love that. Now let's see how that works on the painting. So we're just going to soften that edge. Need some more Indian yellow and raw sienna. So I'm just going to pull some of the Indian yellow from my mix there, plus a bit of raw sienna, because otherwise it's looking too chalky. Now we take that and we just let that slightly go over the edge here and just soften it up a little bit. I need a little more pyro red orange. It's not dark enough. And raw sienna and Indian yellow and titanium white. I think I oversprayed my palette with water and it's just kind of thinning everything out too much. So we're going to try that. Okay, we're going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to it. That'll make it somewhat more opaque and help it to cover a little better. Let's show you this on the white card. There's a lot of trial and error. All right, so this is quite a bit darker, but I think I have that other glaze on there, so it's kind of mixing in between the two. It's kind of mixing in between that lighter one I put down and then this darker one. And it's just getting that softer edge on her lip. So I'll let that dry and I'll just I'll come back on top and diffuse it a little more. I just want to get rid of that really harsh edge because that makes her lips look like they're painted on. And even though this is a painting, we don't want the lips to look like they're painted on. All right. So since we're working on the lips, let's add a little more of a nuance to the left-hand side. And we'll take some alizarin crimson and burnt sienna, and we'll mix those together. With a bit of raw umber dark. Swirl them together really, really good. And then we're going to add shadow to this side, or reinforce the shadow we had. Now I'm gonna mix it into that previous glaze. You remember that previous glaze? That was basically just raw umber dark. I'm going to dilute it with that. So you could just, if you don't have that glaze down in your palette, just mix some matte medium and raw umber dark together, and you can dilute this glaze out a bit so it's not quite as strong of a glaze. It's a little more subdued, and a little less chromatically intense. And we're just going to place that then on this left-hand side of her lips. We're building the form, and we're going to also, I'm going to show you this color on the white card so you can see it. This is what it looks like, by the way. All right, so it's not ultra red, it's kind of brownish. It's like a beautiful cherry wood stain color. And we're going to place that right on the middle of her lips. And we have to almost push that paint in and use some very short little strokes. You can't just glide it along or it seems to miss. It almost has to be pushed into the canvas texture. So notice the little strokes I'm using. I'm just kind of moving the brush ever so slightly to fill it in. Just fill it into those cracks. And we can always dab it with our finger to smooth it out. We darken this right-hand side. I'm going to dab that left side. It got a little too dark, and you can almost control the value by lifting it away, just dabbing it away a little bit, because the thickness of the glaze also determines how dark the value gets. And so as you lift some of it away, you can lighten it up and really get some nice effects, some nice shading and differences in value. Now I want to add a little cast shadow on the top of the lip. And so to do that, we're going to take some Pyro Red Orange and just introduce that into this mix. Add a little bit of matte medium because I was running out of paint there, so it just extends it a little bit. And now with that slightly more reddish color, I'll show you this on the white card. Okay, so you can see it as opposed to the one we had before. See how that's more red? Now let's use that. And we're going to add this shadow from the top lip being cast on the bottom lip. And that really gives it a nice degree of believability when you can have those cast shadows in addition to the surface shadows. See how that brings it out? It really makes a big difference. Lips are far from being done, but we're getting a good sense of the form and the foundation now. And on the left-hand side, we'll have to develop a little more shading. But we don't want to use this really bright red color for that. We want something to be a little more subdued, a little more toned down for that. All right. Now at this stage, let's see, I will do that little shadow since I have this color on my palette. Although I'd like to show you some different things, I want to utilize what I have. And you probably would want to do the same because it's just an efficient use of color, an efficient use of the glazes that you have on your palette. So let's add that little shadow on the left-hand side. We're going to take this first color that I had, you know, the one that was a little more subdued, and we're going to add some of this ultramarine blue raw umber dark glaze. I don't know if you can see this on my palette. Here it is. We're going to add it over here. So it's over there on the palette. We're going to add it over here and just cool that down a bit. I'm just going to add a bit more raw umber dark to it. And then I want to just add a shadow to this left-hand side. Let's show you this on the white card. This is what it looks like. Almost like what we had before on that glaze, just a little bit different. You can see it in comparison to the other ones. It's just a bit cooler in tone. We're just going to add the shadow kind of vertically over on top of the lips. And it's going to take a little bit to build all that shading, but I want to just start it off there. Yeah, I think that'll be good. And then I can darken this left side a little bit more. That's good. So I'll need to do a little more sculpting work on the bottom edge of the lips, but this will work for now. Let's add that glaze below, though. Let's darken that area below her lips. And I think we can use, let's see, this color we had from before with the ultramarine blue. That was the glaze we used for the hair. And let's see if I can show this to you on my palette right over here. We're going to add a little more raw umber dark to that. A little more ultramarine blue. And just a touch of alizarin crimson. We want it to be dark enough that we can see it, and it can substantially darken this area below her lip without getting too dark. So we're going to run the glaze horizontally, and we're going to let it occupy just a little bit of this area. We're going to wipe off the edge so that it's not harsh. And we're going to let it go into that shadow just a bit. And we're going to precisely bring this down, soften the edges. And I'm going to soften the edge on the top as well. So it's going to take a little bit more work here too, because I need to lighten up this section. It's just a little too dark overall. But that we can definitely do that. And let's just come along the bottom edge of her jawline and darken that as well. So with that, we will take this raw umber dark, a little bit of alizarin crimson, and darken that bottom edge. So you can see this here on my palette. And I need to mix it into this lip color just to lighten it up a bit. So we'll pull from a little bit more of the alizarin crimson color that we had, plus a bit of raw sienna. That's somewhat more opaque. It'll help it to cover better. And we'll add a glaze to that, but let's test it on the white card. This is what we have. And now I want to glaze on top of this and see what it looks like. So we're going on this lower area of the chin. Only this far, not all the way up into there, only this far. Because we want to leave that cool tone for the reflected light that's on that other side of her face. And then we just add this glaze only along that bottom edge, building up a bit of gradation and shading, and we use the point of this round brush to feather it out. Okay, that's good. Now let's dive back into her eyes. In fact, we haven't worked on them yet in this session. But let's work on her eyes. I just want to restore some of what I lost when I did this semi-opaque smoothing layer. So I'm adding umber dark and a little bit of ultramarine blue together. Umber dark and ultramarine blue, and just a bit of alizarin crimson. And I'll show you this on the white card. So it's quite dark, almost black. And I just want to add that little bit to her eyebrows. And that got a little dark, so I'm going to dilute that down. Now I'll show you what that looks like. So it's just diluted a little bit on the white card. It's just a little bit lighter. Wipe that away. And we'll just bring this glaze in on top of what we had. And we want to go on top of the upper eyelid fold crease and darken that again. It looks like it's just a little bit darker on this right hand side. So bring this glaze down. Sometimes you really have to twist your brush a lot to get that in there. Just twist it to get that paint just at the end. You can see how I'm twisting it here with my hand. And that really helps to get that paint just at the end, just at the tip where it can flow right off. We're going to add that little glaze right on the interior here. And I'm going to also work it into her iris again and just darken that one more level. So we have a lot of layers on this iris. And it's still not done yet. I'm even getting a little bit of the pupil in there, just blending in that form of the pupil ever so slightly. But I'm adding this dark little shape here, showing that form of her, the upper eyelid fold against the nose. And then we're going to do a little more detail work on the eyelashes and just get those forms established a little bit more precisely. And then let's work on the other eye over here. And again, we'll establish the boundary lines of the pupil a little bit more. And we're really getting some wonderful nuances in her eye. And I still need to put the final coloring in, but this will give us some room. It's almost building up monochromatically the form of her eye, in a sense, by having a darker area for the pupil and then the area above where it's really close to the upper eyelid fold. And then I can just put in a little bit of brown in the interior and warm that up and give it that depth. This is getting us close. I'll put a couple little strands, a couple little hairs on those eyebrows just to show that it has some form without making it look too arbitrary. And we'll have to get a little more shading in between there. I'm going to pull from this lighter mixture here that I used for her lips. Remember that? This glaze over here that was kind of reddish and pinkish. I'm just going to add a little bit of that coloring for her eyebrows. If we use black, it's going to be too dark. So we really have to make sure that we're not just painting every little eyebrow hair, but we're trying to suggest them by using a lighter skin tone color. All right, so that'll really pay off dividends if you don't just paint the eyebrows in with just a few strokes and call it done, but instead try to put the shading around it using a slightly darker version of the skin tone that the eyebrows are up against. And that's what we're doing here. Try to get that directional flow of the eyebrow hairs. They flow in this way, they come to a point, and then they flow in from the top and they meet together. You'll find that to be the case on every person you meet. Just some eyebrows are a little thicker, some are a little darker, some are spaced higher up from the eyes, but they all flow in that same way. And if you can get that in your painting, it'll make a big difference as far as implying the realism in the face. And we'll just finish this off here with a little glaze on that side of the eyebrows. But there's much more to do. But this is at a good place, I think. I just want to do one little nuance on her interior of the eye. I'm using a bit of alizarin crimson and burnt sienna, and this is that glaze that I did for the lips. You can see it here on the white card what that looks like. And I'm just going to add this little tiny point here on her eye. So this little detail for her tear duct. Boy, we have to get that brush really to a nice point. You can even use a large thick brush like this if you get the paint really fluid. It's amazing how much detail you can get even with a size 10. It's all in getting the paint nice and fluid, getting it twisted to a point, resting your hand on the canvas for really good stability, and then just very slowly grazing that brush across the canvas, just letting it drop in. Just drop that paint right in there. And you can just barely touch it. That's why I love acrylic. You can't do this with oils. You can't rest your hand on the canvas with oil paintings. You'd smear the whole thing up. You'd have to use a maul stick or use your hand to steady, and you see a lot of people doing that, steadying with the other hand. But here, No, we can rest that hand right on the canvas and get lots of stability. And I love it. I love it. Well, that's going to do it for this lesson here. Let's zoom out. All right. So this is where we're at. This is where we're at for the conclusion of lesson number 7. Thanks for hanging with me. This is a long process. It takes a lot of patience to paint an acrylic portrait with the glazing technique, no doubt about it. And I really, really appreciate all of you who have hung with me, who you've you haven't given up. You know, a lot of you are struggling with your paintings, and I saw that in the Facebook group. And it's natural when you begin something new. Yeah, it takes time. It takes time to learn this technique. You do, one painting, you can do it pretty well when you hang with it. Some people, will really like the painting they did even the first try. Others, it'll take, 2 or 3, and then a few more, it might take, half a dozen. But if you stick with the process, you're really going to be amazed at what you can create. And so again, my hat's off to you, my respect to you for hanging in there, not giving up, persevering. It's building an endurance in you as an artist and a person. And so if you stay with this process, I promise you I won't give up on you. I'll keep helping you with all the tips I'm able to. So anyway, we have one more lesson to go. One more lesson to go. We're going to bring the painting home in lesson number 8. I look forward to seeing you in that lesson. But until then, make sure you subscribe to this channel. Make sure you like this video if you found it useful and helpful and interesting. Share it with a friend. Share this challenge with a friend. Sign up. All that good stuff. Go to realisticacrylic.com. You can find more of my tutorials there, and I'll be happy to help you paint a portrait you can be proud of. All right? So we'll see you in that next lesson. God bless. We'll talk to you soon. Take care.